Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine Battles, and today I wanted to briefly discuss one of my favorite educational advocates of all time, Jonathan Kozol. So some of you may or may not be familiar with Kozol's work and how he got started out in education. So if you aren't, I will give you just a brief background about how he got his start. So it was in the mid 1960s that during the civil rights movement where Kozol felt very compelled to find a way to pretty much contribute to the communities that were being impacted by the civil rights issues that were going on during that day. So mainly people of color. So to make a long story short, he got a job as a substitute in the Boston public school system. And it was there where he became more exposed to the injustices that students of color, namely African-American students, were facing in these lower income, disadvantaged communities. So during that time, Kozol, he, brought some innovation and tried to do some creative things. And he was eventually dismissed for attempting to do curriculum deviation because he introduced a Langston Hughes poem to his students, but he ultimately was fired because it was curriculum deviation. And so from that point on, he pretty much wrote a book about his first year experience, got a lot of press, and from there, that started his educational advocacy career. So Kozol's work has largely focused on continuing to raise awareness around these injustices and issues that students of color from low income, disadvantaged, or not from, but in low income and disadvantaged communities and schools are continuing to face. And the other part of his work is calling on those lawmakers and educational leaders and other individuals that could ultimately help improve these conditions through changes with policies and practice and advocacy work, civic engagement, all the different avenues that could help achieve the change that would create equity ultimately in our nation's public school system. And as a result of this work, and his work spans over nearly 6 decades, but as a result of this work, many governmental agencies, educational leaders, different individuals, and especially in the education sector, they've used a lot of Kozol's perspectives and his ideas as frameworks for addressing different educational issues. So here's an example of one of Kozol's frameworks being applied to a real-time educational issue. So in this article, the authors wanted to determine whether or not a formula that Kozol used in one of his most famous books written to date, Savage Inequalities, still apply to school funding issues today. So if you're familiar with Savage Inequalities, then you know that it was written in 1991, and this article was written in 2020. So that is almost a 30-year difference. So pretty much the authors wanted to determine if this formula still applied today. And what the formula encompassed is it focused on analyzing the differences between school funding in wealthier districts compared to lower income districts. So for this article, the authors focused on school funding issues among Idaho public schools. And ultimately what they found, if you can see it here in this conclusion, they found very similar findings to what Kozol found even 30 years ago. So as you can see, that goes to show that Kozol's work is still impactful and still very relevant to today. And it can be applied to so many areas of in education, and it can be used to solve so many educational issues that we're still facing today in our nation's public schools. So I hope you enjoyed this and that you learn a little bit more about my favorite educational advocate. God bless. Have a great day.